Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us live. We're just about to get started here. We're having our panel today. Oh, is anyone else having sound happening?
No.
Mine's good. Mine's good. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Mine just glitched out for a moment. Cool. Well, as long as everyone can hear me, we'll go ahead and keep getting started. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about crop diversification and kind of the decision between growing multiple crops or just one. And we're going to be hearing from 3 farmers. You'll see them here. We have Matt Marsh with American Heartland Acres, Tom Deacon with Fable from Farm to Table, and Nick Burton with State of the Soil. Just so you all know, we do have this chat option during the live panel, so we'd love to interact with you. You can send us our questions throughout the panel, and we'll try to answer a few of them live for you. And at this point, I think I'd love to just have you guys introduce yourselves. Matt, do you want to start? Tell us a little bit about your farm, what crops you're growing.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Matt Marsh. I am one of the co-owners, co-founders of American Heartland Acres. We are an aquaponic greenhouse right now that specifically grows Genovese basil. And we have monocropped from the beginning, doing just that. And so I guess as far as introductions go, that's probably good, huh?
Cool. Nick, how about you?
Sure. Nick with Victory Gardens in Paris, Texas. From day one, we've grown fruiting crops, specialty herbs, specialty greens, a lot of Asian greens. Tried to always fill in the market with stuff they couldn't get from anywhere else. A lot of Salanova lettuce, and currently we're doing a lot of green forest romaine, kind of getting ready for the season. Strawberries, zucchini, squash, kind of the whole 9 yards.
Awesome. Thank you. Nice to have you. Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Deacon with Fable from Farm to Table. We're located in Westchester County, New York. We started in a 1,000 square foot hydroponic greenhouse, and now we're also growing out in the field as well.
Cool. Do you want to mention what all crops you're growing?
Yes, we started with primarily basil and a few other herbs, including rosemary, oregano, thyme, parsley, chives, and sage. And then as we went out into the field, we worked on some fruiting crops like tomatoes, onions, garlics, pepper, things like that.
Cool. Thank you guys for those introductions. I suppose I should introduce myself as well. I'm Hallie, the director of Upstart University, which is an online learning platform for farmers, and I'll be moderating this panel today. So we're really excited to jump into the questions and talk a little bit more specifically about crop diversification. So just to start out, I thought we could discuss why you each made the decision to either grow a single crop, monocrop, or to grow multiple crops. Do you want to explain what led you to your decision for monocropping at first, Matt?
Yeah, for sure. In our situation, none of us were chefs. So I felt, for me, I was chasing a lot of different opinions about what I should grow, what specialty stuff to grow, if there was a particular arugula that I could chase that would be high profit, right? So I just went with the simple thing that Dr. Story said, and he said, basil or herbs are high profit, high margin things, and the powerhouse of it is basil. And for me, that was simple. I just said, well, I'm going to grow the heck out of it and sell it until I can't anymore, or until it doesn't really make business sense to go to 1,000 accounts just to sell one basil. And it's worked out well for us. I also knew that the majority of places actually used basil. So I didn't have to go into the market and say, let me cherry pick all of these places, or let me door knock 12 places to find one that would actually use my specialty crop, right? I just knew that a lot of people used basil. And so I felt like it was an easier way for me to enter the market, since it was a new market for me. I had never really done anything in restaurants. I'd never done anything with caterers or anything like that. And so everything I found was, this is something everyone uses. And so it was a good way for me to, one, learn specifically how to grow really, really high quality, fresh basil, and not be too complicated in the greenhouse for a newbie like myself. But also not have to, also have a learning curve inside of the restaurant side, right? Since I didn't cook much, I'm not a chef, I don't know any chefs really. I just felt like I was probably lowering my learning curve, and on both ends of that, from production and sales. And it worked out for us. It's worked out pretty well, actually.
Have there been any special challenges just growing one crop? Have you ever had any major wipeouts from a pest issue or anything like that?
Yeah, we had a thrip outbreak one time, and I think some of that's because we also have some standards in terms of no pesticides. We use only biocontrols, and that was our fault. It doesn't mean you can't use biocontrols. We just kind of didn't catch something early enough. And then basil specifically, maybe if you're monocropping something else, you wouldn't have this specific problem, but we get a little bit chilly in the winter, and nothing like what you guys deal with there in Wyoming, but I've spent a lot of money keeping my greenhouse warm at night because basil's so susceptible to low temperatures. Yeah, there are challenges, but for us, we were able to overcome them because we could get a good price inside the market. So yes, challenges, but I don't know if they were absolutely detrimental, if that makes sense.
Sure. Can you explain sort of your sales technique for the basil? Are you selling it live? Are you pre-packaging it, harvesting it?
Okay. Yeah. So we harvest, deliver same day, and I cut quite a bit of the stem out. So any of the main stem pretty much goes away. We do basically just leaves and like usable stems. I don't call any of it live because it's been cut, but I make sure that when I do cut it, it goes into something as close to 60 to 65 degrees as possible, and it has to be delivered within a few hours. And we just put it in bags and deliver it. That's specifically because our main market is restaurants, right? So if we were to go into grocery stores, you probably couldn't just do that. You probably have to use some clamshells. But our harvesting technique and keeping it at the proper temperatures would still be the exact same. It's just we put it into a different, package. But I think that's probably a good start for how we would harvest and deliver. We just make sure they get it quick, and we don't let it get too warm or too cold, and people are loving it.
Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you for that explanation. Matt is a good example of when it's the right choice for your market to grow a single crop and specialize in that for the reasons he just explained. And now, Nick and Tom, do you guys want to talk a bit more about the crops you are growing and how you came to the decision to grow those based on your market and based on the decision to diversify?
Nick, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Allie. We originally started growing everything, completely diversified for the simple fact I get bored real easy. I didn't, the notion of just growing a sea of lettuce, I don't know, I don't think I could handle it. So I really enjoyed the quick turns that Asian Greens gave us, 30 days versus 45 days on a head of lettuce. So it gave us a nice mix, and I am a cook, so we do cook a lot at the house. Everything we do here is prepared salads. I'm actually in my kitchen right now. So the ability to harvest all these different crops, turn them into an added value product, and get them out the door, we needed the diversification. Of course, that meant a grow room and a greenhouse and a high tunnel and some outdoor crops. So it really was more costly to get started, but it let us have this product that was so value added that it just worked out very well.
Perfect. And Tom, I know you're doing sort of something similar. You have a lot of value added products on your farm as well. Do you want to talk some about that?
Sure. Yeah, we started out primarily with basil, but we also worked with a few different other herbs. One of the reasons we like herbs is because you can dry and jar them. So as Nick was just saying, there's if you have an overabundance, if a restaurant or a grocery store, or you don't sell them out at the farmer's market, you can actually dry and jar these just to get some extra value amongst those herbs. One of the other reasons we eventually started to diversify was just because, as Matt was touching on, if you aren't careful, if you do have a disease or anything like that, you can completely wipe yourself out. So 2 Augusts in a row, we've had basal downy mildew despite our intense preventative efforts. We're in New York. In August, it gets very, very humid up here. And despite our best efforts as trying to stay organic, we have been wiped out with that. So that's another reason why we diversified. And then, as you start to expand in more restaurants and you tend to farmers markets, especially the farmers markets, they like to see a diverse range of crops on your hand. So that's the other reason why we did it.
Awesome. Thank you guys for those comparisons. Looks like we're starting to get a few questions rolling in. Matt, can you tell us what the population is that you're serving with your basil?
Oh God, I should probably know that, but I'm in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. I could Google it pretty quick, but I mean, we've got a lot. I mean, over 1 million, probably even more than that. But our population is huge, so we're definitely not in a rural area. Durham, North Carolina was just rated the tastiest city in the South. It's a really good market for us, and so there are a lot of high-end markets, but genuinely, our major restaurants are not the high-end markets. Our major restaurants are small Italian places, and so there are a lot. I wish I had that answer. I'm sorry, I didn't do my statistical research.
No worries there. Can you tell us how much basil you sell to just one restaurant on average?
So average is 2 pounds a week, right? I figured that out, but literally I'm so close to closing an account that does 25 a week, right? So you'll have these big home run hitters, but average is 2 pounds a week for sure.
Awesome. Okay, getting a few more here. How easy is it to source the seed for specialty greens and herbs if you're going to diversify your crops? I'm sure it's easier to get just one.
Yeah, I send a text to Randy, my Johnny seed rep. It's the easiest thing I do on the farm is source seeds. I call him. This is what I want to do. We're implementing it. We're actually fixing to test a new program. Just sent him the list over the weekend. He called me right back. We've got that relationship built up with our rep that it's so back and forth. It's so easy to get in touch with them. So one call to Johnny's, one text to Johnny's to your rep, and that's it.
Awesome. Looks like we have one about biocontrols. That was something you mentioned, Matt. Can you tell us what biocontrols you're using? And Tom, same with you probably, because I know you're using those on your farm as well.
Yeah, so gosh, we have a pretty regular schedule of putting out ladybugs and lacewings because they're generalists. But then we've had some mites that were specific to fungus gnats that we have a rep that we call, and we just say, hey, this is kind of what we're seeing. Can you tell us what we need to get? And so some of that stuff is a la carte, but we tried to use praying mantis, but they kind of became like cannibalistic. So since we didn't have at one time a high volume of pests for them to eat, they like ate each other. So apparently that's normal, but we lacewings is our go-to. And then we keep a beneficial nematode basically in our towers all the time. So we're always putting those out so that if any larva is inside there, they eat that.
Thanks.
And in New York, we pretty much just have 3 sprays and then 2 insects. I mean, we rotate between garlic to repel the pests, neem to suffocate them, or we'll use oxidate, which is kind of like hydrogen peroxide for funguses. And then just 2 of the ones that Matt just mentioned, ladybugs and lacewings. Between that combination, we pretty much have things under control.
Awesome. This is a good topic here because one of the decisions behind growing a single crop or multiple can relate to pest problems. So like we were talking about in Matt's case, you could have your entire crop wiped out because of a particular pest or issue. But on one side, it can be easier to manage for that because you're only having to maybe use one biocontrol to control it. But in systems where you're growing multiple crops, if one particular crop is targeted by a certain pest and the other plants aren't, you might only lose a portion of your crops, which is great. But it is a little bit harder maybe to control that with a single biocontrol. So Nick and Tom, have you guys had any issues trying to match your controls across the variety of crops that you're growing?
I use a lot of physical barriers, airlocks. We're completely insect screened on everything, the intakes, the outtakes. I try to do that as much as possible. Same thing with the other guys. We bring in ladybugs, lacewigs. Out in the high tunnel, I'll use a lot of DE. like we'll plant eggplant that really attracts away from everything else. They hit that, and then we'll just hammer it. So it's a lot of, I'm spacing what that's called right now, but I basically plant one plant that's going to attract it away from everything else, and then we kind of control that area more heavily.
Awesome.
And something else that we started to do when I first set up the greenhouse was each rack was its own dedicated herb. So it was a rack of 25 towers of basil, then 25 of parsley. And after time, you'll realize that if you have a pest problem or a disease problem, it will wipe out the whole rack. So we actually have buffers now. So the last row of that rack might be parsley or sage or something that really doesn't attract a lot of insects or pests and will act as a buffer zone between 2 rows of basil. So that's another practice that we do just to keep things under control.
Great.
One thing that we noticed last year in the high tunnel is we put out 4 seeds of red noodle beans, and those things got covered in aphids, and we didn't have trouble anywhere else in there. It was just on those. So we cut it down to a couple of plants, and we just knew that was gonna, there was something about that plant, either the smell or the way it tasted, but that's what concentrated all the bugs, and it was kind of a nice effect because it kept them off everything else.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on that, actually the Newfar basil is what brought in the thrips. I mean, they just attacked it, but they did spread into the rest of our greenhouse. It was pretty quick, but I didn't see a single thrip until I put Newfar in, and then once I put that in, they just kind of exploded. But one quick thing too is we're an aquaponic farm, so I'm a little bit less flexible in terms of being able to spray or something like that. So that's why we're so strict about some of those biocontrol things.
Great. Okay, looking at a few more questions here. Ivan is asking which system is the most productive, and if you guys can each provide a description of the systems you're using, that would be great as well.
As far as productive, I mean, we're a 100 tower system in our greenhouse right now. We're installing a 780 tower system currently into a hydroponic indoor farm, but I can do 65 pounds of basil per week, I think is what I'm at. But that would be tops. Average, I'm probably between 45 to 50 on a really solid, good light, good temperature season or grow cycle.
Nick, what kind of system are you growing in?
So in the grow room indoors, we're running NFT, which is a joy to harvest. It's all at waist level. There's all the maintenance is, we don't have to crawl around anything like that. So as far as harvesting with NFT, that's great. I think we're right now currently around 1,800 holes of production. It's very small. And then the greenhouse where we keep all of our fruiting crops, about 36. We just moved away from Dutch buckets. We cut holes right in the foundation, not in the foundation, but the ground that we have. So we're growing everything in soil in the greenhouse. Again, it's a lot easier to harvest that way than the buckets because we have just a little bit of extra space that we found. And then the high tunnel, we just harvested a bunch of lettuce yesterday, and it really makes you appreciate the waste level when you're using NFT. So, but it's our biggest one at 30 by 96. So we get a little bit of all the worlds there.
Great.
And here in New York, our greenhouse is 1,000 square feet. We're hydroponic. We fluctuate a range from about 150 towers to 200 towers. We kind of go where the market tells us, and every so often, depending on the season or the restaurants, we will dabble into expand into microgreens, and then we'll bring some towers back. That's one of the reasons we love the towers, just how flexible they are. We can just take them out, throw a bed of microgreens in, pull out the bed of microgreens, put the towers back. So yeah, we range from 150 to 200, and it's been working well for us. I really think that it more depends on the herb that you're growing, or the leafy green, which will tell you if it can handle aquaponics or if it can handle hydroponics or NFT versus vertical and things like that.
Sure. That brings up another, oh, go ahead.
I'm going to say, not to beat a dead horse or anything, but that specifically what you were talking about, I wasn't prepared initially to do that kind of stuff. Like I didn't know enough about growing and how to manipulate this particular herb versus that. And that's one of the major reasons that we started monocropping, was just for simplicity. Like that way I knew how many towers I could run every single week. In no way was it to say that that's a bad idea. It's just, for me, the simplicity was what made me comfortable. So I just wanted to point that out initially, just to say that, you know, as an example, that's why we did what we did.
No, I give you a lot of credit, Matt, because basil, I mean, despite what people think, basil is not one of the easiest things to grow. I mean, you want a beginner crop, you should start with like parsley or chives or something like that. I mean, basil's, that's a tough one to start out with, so I give you a lot of credit.
I appreciate that.
And aquaponically, especially. Cool. Well,
I try to make it as hard as possible, except keep it simple. Yeah.
Good. Well, that brings in another discussion topic that I was thinking of. What kind of crop rotation strategies do you guys use to combat seasonal changes, both in terms of your climate and your market?
So we use a lot of lettuce, obviously. Most of it's controlled within the greenhouse or the grow room, but we need more and more. So we got the Muir lettuce, which will take a hotter dosage, and move that out to the high tunnel to give us some more room for some of the more delicate stuff in there. So we combat the seasonality by moving higher temperature varieties around. We know what can take the heat. We know that we can produce more tomatoes in the summertime. We need a little less greens, but as we're growing, we need more greens. So we just move to those other varieties. I know exactly how much we can rotate in and out of that grow room, which stays at constant temperature. So that really doesn't play into, other than keeping things fresh for the clients. We're just able to utilize the different growing systems that we have and play with variety more than anything.
Would you say diversifying your crops kind of gives you a buffer in between those seasons, as opposed to if you were just growing one crop year round?
I think so. I mean, if you look at lettuce, I mean, look at how many different kinds of lettuce there actually are. With us, we noticed that, you know, Rex lettuce is like the hydroponic lettuce that everybody uses, but in my particular system, we're prone to a little tip burn on it. So I have to operate within a range. You know, it's not a dialed in pH, it's not a dialed in EC, because I have so many different varieties. So I kind of find the happy medium where everything can live, except for Rex. I just can't get it to go. I have a little bit of trouble with incised red and green Salanova, but I do great with red and green butter and Tropicana, Breen, all that stuff I mentioned earlier. So the ability to go into soil or leave it in NFT has really helped.
So Matt, since you're just growing a single crop right now, how do you manage seasonal changes? I know you're talking about, you had mentioned another system here soon. Is that sort of your way of combating seasonal changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a better way for me to combat seasonal changes, right? So it's interesting. As I was listening to Nick, clearly knows what the heck he's doing, but my mental energy was actually spent, as opposed to finding out which crops would work in the season, it was how to manipulate my greenhouse to make sure that the seasons didn't matter, right? So whether it be airflow, humidity, CO2, all of that kind of stuff, my mental energy went into how do I then control my environment to make sure that the cold doesn't hurt, or that 100 degrees and 90 degree temperature or 90 degree humidity doesn't become a problem with mildew. So that's where my mental energy went. So we got a wood boiler, we've got a pretty robust HVAC system, and so as we looked at, okay, things are going well, but if we're going to grow, does it make sense to keep trying to fight the outdoor? I mean, we have 4 legit seasons here, so trying to fight that when it comes to light availability, all of those kinds of things, since basil is pretty hard to grow, it has light restriction. I mean, it's just a lot of things you have to consider. Indoor was our answer. So the ultimate answer was indoor, but we made it work outside. I just don't think it's as profitable.
Sure. Without
giving, a 40-minute excerpt on why and how. So
thanks.
Yeah.
Tom, did you want to chime in at all on this question here?
Well, yeah, I mean, as Matt said, you really want to tailor your environment to handle the outside seasons, because we grow in a greenhouse in New York. So in the winter, there could be 2 feet of snow on the ground. And our first year when we did primarily basil, it worked pretty well. I mean, when we grow pro lights, so I mean that helped. And the positioning of our heater to where the crops are, I had a rack behind the heater where I just grew some colder crops. I think I grew kale at the time. So everything in front of the heater is where I grew the basil. So I think that it's tailoring your environment to kind of handle those outside elements.
Great. Thank you guys for that information. So we're just about to wrap it up here. We are pushing 11:30 almost. So one more thing before we go, just to make sure we sum everything up. Would you guys each mind telling everybody how long you've been farming, and then giving a quick summary of what your decision was behind growing either a single crop or multiple crops, and just the biggest pro and con of that? We can start with Matt or Nick.
Okay, I'll start. We've been farming 2 years, and to be 100% transparency, I guess, I hadn't grown a thing in my life. Like, I mean, I would kill a goldfish. And so we started 2 years ago, and it was just, we jumped in head first and went all at it, which is why Upstart University was so important for us. There's your little plug. I'm just but again, it was because of that. We kept it simple. We monocropped. And when we looked at the business model, the price that we could get for basil and its appreciation in our market made sense. And we've done that all the way up until now. And even if I were to stay in my same system, I would monocrop forever, right? But for us to grow into a bigger system, when we started to look at the logistical costs, so I'm going to need 8 drivers as opposed to 4, because they have to take one product to so many different places. They have to fan out so far. I'll always I'll always push the idea that I'll monocrop a high profit thing until it doesn't make sense anymore, right? And so as we grow, eventually there's going to be this diminishing return, so that if I could go to 100 accounts as opposed to 400 accounts, it's going to save me logistics, right? Delivery, all that kind of stuff. But I can sell 5 different things to that one stop. So I may not make as much per that particular crop versus basil, but I don't lose as much having to go to so many different places. And so I think there is a fine line that you have to figure where it makes sense for you. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Matt. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, just to tail in on Matt, I think you really hit the nail on the head. Everybody that I talk to that has any issue, it's not the growing, it's the distribution of it all. So it's trucking is, none of us got into this to become truck drivers, so it's just something to think about as you grow. As far as the diversification question, we didn't start out with the salad business, but we quickly pivoted to that, a very quick pivot. I don't know if we would have found where we were supposed to be in the world had we not been so diversified. So again, me being so bored all the time, with just one crop, it's allowed us to have room to do cut flowers and enjoy all the seasons. Even though we do operate within a controlled environment, we're able to bring so much more to market and in front of people's plates, stuff like Claytonia and just all that just oddball stuff that tastes so good. That's such a surprise to everybody. That's what I'm in it for, is to bring these new things to market, but do it in a way that's on an established sales pipeline.
Thanks, Nick. Tom?
Yeah, I think the 2 things you really need to consider, one is just like Matt and Nick just touched on, if you can control your environment, growing one crop is great, and selling to multiple restaurants that way is easier. I think if you are looking to sell at farmers markets and maybe at a farm stand, that is where you're going to really need to diversify, because no one's going to pull up to your farm stand if you just have one crop. But if you have a diverse range of herbs and leafy greens, that's where it'll be. So farm stands, farmers markets, that's where diversification is key. And I think if you, as both of them touched on, delivery is a very hard thing for us. Sending off, 1 pound of this, 1 pound of that, 1 pound of that is just tough, because if you're emailing several different restaurants, they're going to want more than that. They're going to want 2, 3, 4 pounds of something. So that's where if you have the room, if you have the greenhouse to grow, and you can diversify, that'll be key to getting into those farmers markets as well as multiple restaurants.
Awesome. Great advice from everybody. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you.
No problem.
And it's very humbling that you would invite us. Thank you.
Of course. Well, we're planning on doing more, so we may ask you back in the future. And thank you, everybody who joined us live and chatted with us. We really appreciate that. Before we let you go, I just wanted to let you know about a couple resources that are related to this that you might take advantage of. We do have a free production estimates guide. So if you're using ZipGrow in this case, that'll help you estimate what type of production you might be able to get on your crops as you're making the crop decision. And if you click the little icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen, I believe, it should pop out a little button for you to go and see that free production estimates guide there. And we did also just publish a new course on Upstart University, which Matt kindly mentioned. That's our farm training resource. The new course is called Hydroponic and Aquaponic Crops. So if you're trying to decide on what crops to go, or to grow, this covers over 25 different crops, greens, herbs, fruiting crops, specialty crops, goes into depth about growing conditions, sales points, markets, everything you need to know. So you can also find a link for that in that little info button in the corner. And finally, if you're interested in voting for our next panel topic, you can do that. We're going to post that link here in the chat for you. So if you have any ideas what you would like covered, please let us know or vote up other ideas there as well. I think that's it. Thank you guys again so much. We really look forward to talking to you all soon.
Great. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You guys are doing a great job, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
You too. Bye-bye.